welcome back to the My Work Show. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and that is the relationship between workers and companies. Because for the longest time, there's been sort of, if it, even if it wasn't necessarily completely fair, it's been sort of the relationship between companies and employees have been relatively stable, right? So if you applied for a job that the company who provided that job offered some sort of a security stability for you, they offered benefits and they offered company perks that established you to essentially build your career, stay and have one job. Maybe maybe you're gonna move around a little bit, but relatively speaking, if you did everything correctly, you were able to stick around and establish yourself and build a career. And then even if you wanted to move to a different company, you were able to say, hey, listen, actually I work for this business for 15 years, 10 years, 8 years, 5 years, and I'm looking to move up the ladder and advance. So for that reason, I decided to essentially come to you guys, and I'm here and I'm good to go ahead and start this new job. But I feel like in the past couple of years, and probably it's been getting worse since COVID, this has changed with the emergence of the gig economy. Businesses really started to realize that, hey, by the way, I can just hire people and keep offering them less and less, because I feel like once a business starts working with contractors, they start realizing, oh, like I don't have to pay tax after them. I don't have to take care of them. They can take care of themselves, and that's it. Like we're good there. And I feel like ever since that happened, jobs start to provide less and less for employees, and it has gone so bad that essentially we're looking at this scenario where you're putting your work in, you're putting your hours in, and you're getting less and less back, right? Because the idea is, even, don't get me wrong, no one has this expectation that they're going to get a raise like every month or even every year. But the fact that when you put your effort in and it does feel like nothing, you're not really getting anything back, and then there's no job security anymore either, and then you're constantly in this fear of, am I going to be the next person being laid off? It doesn't really create a healthy environment. Not only that, with the cost of living crisis in the United States, that creates an additional layer of friction, because a lot of people out there need to have second and third jobs in order to make ends meet. And that creates a lot of friction. Why? Because I feel an experienced employer will sort of know that the person has a second job, and maybe that person cannot give the company uh, their 100%. But then at the same time, why is it required? Because if the person works the 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours required by that person in order to get the full-time salary, then there shouldn't be any pressure on that person to put more work in. And I feel like that is exactly what's happening these days, that employers are putting more and more pressure on people who work for them in very a lot of times in ways that are not beneficial for the workers. And since there's fewer job opportunities out there, people are less willing to move and change jobs. Therefore, this creates this environment where, for one, wages have been stagnating for many, many years. Two, the cost of living crisis has gone to that point where, like, literally people in the United States like don't have emergency savings at all whatsoever, right? And this creates something extremely toxic, right, for everyone around, because for one, I feel companies are not going to get 100% out of people because they need to allocate their resources elsewhere, and then maybe they're going to show up to work more tired compared to let's say when if they only had to do like one job at a time, right? So that creates friction on the company side, and on the employee side, obviously you're not getting paid more. You have to have multiple jobs, and in some cases the agreement between you and the company is not even W-2, maybe it's 1099, which creates an additional point of friction. Why? Because you have fewer benefits, you don't have benefits at all, but you have fewer rights. And then because of the way labor law works in the United States, you can get fired at any time. And that creates additional friction. And I feel these days companies have been taking advantage of this more and more and more. And they fire you for things that are not even your fault. They just fire you because they're not capable of making their business work. I mean, the business owners cannot make their business work. And then in some cases, they're using the labor law is definitely on their side, right? Like if they take everything out of the business and they don't pay you, you cannot do anything about it, right? Like you cannot even, if the amount is small enough, you cannot even sue them, because you can take them to small claims court, but they're not going to do anything about it. That's how it works these days, right? And this creates more and more and more and more and more friction. And quite frankly, I don't really know like where this is all going to end, because it's not really healthy for either parties. And on top of all this, right, there's something else. With the emergence of AI, with the emergence of more productivity by a single individual, it is more likely that new contractual agreements are going to be necessary in order to maintain relationships between employees, contractors, and companies. Because here's the thing, a company in the United States has they're considered a U.S. person, right? And because of this, what happens is that they have some rights only U.S. people have access to, right? But then, if that's the case, if that's the way legally the United States, as a country, is interpreting the law, then I feel the same should apply to those other U.S. people, meaning people who are working for those businesses, right? So what I mean by that is, if companies want to be considered people, maybe companies should treat people as people. Meaning, I feel we've gone to that point where we need to we have to restructure the relationship again, as I said earlier, between employees and companies. And I feel the best way to do that is perhaps revising some of the legal matters around employment, right? And workers need to have more rights. And I talked about unionizing on this channel, but I feel this goes further than that, because some people out there, they might not want to have a huge business, and maybe they're quite happy to be contractors, right? If that's the case, those people, I feel, should be considered, if they're out on their own, they shouldn't be put in this weird bucket of, well, you're just a contractor, and then when there's negotiations between the contractor and the business, essentially you are given, you don't have the upper hand. I feel there should be laws around this where negotiations happen in a fair environment that actually supports the contractors, and essentially give them rights. Because again, a lot of times what happens, these people are considered employees when they're not. They're not employees. They cannot be forced to work certain hours. There's no contractual agreement around doing those hours. You as a contractor, as the 1099 contractor, and the business have agreed to a certain amount of money for a certain amount of, um, uh, let's say, a list of services provided. And I feel this is a very important point, right? Because if we don't consider this, there's going to be more and more and more and more exploitation of 1099 contractors. And essentially, what that allows is businesses are going to have an upper hand. And then, what if these contractors are good and they are capable, and then they are able to, grow, and perhaps by doing that, they can actually start that business they always wanted to start? Because I definitely feel there's an extreme amount of suppression going on from businesses, and they're suppressing 1099 contractors, and they're putting them in this category that doesn't really exist. So I feel it's extremely illegal. No one really cares about it, which is really concerning, and I feel it has to be fixed by not talking about it, by actually not looking at the labor law and considering different interpretations of things that are existing out there. Then we are looking at a an environment that is not fair in 2025. And I know that there's a lot of things that are not fair in 2025. It's not like this is the only thing, but I feel this would be a step forward, because as AI is taking over more and more jobs, I mean, you don't have to look too far. You look at what happened with Amazon recently. They laid off 14,000 employees, right? So it is happening. And then what will happen to those people? Well, they're going to have to do something. And then if they decide not to go back and not to go back to be a W-2 employee, then maybe other options are going to be considered. But in the current environment, those other options are not necessarily the best. So yeah, I feel this is a really important matter that has to be actively discussed. And I encourage everyone to really think about this, because it's super important to talk about this topic more and more and more as we're getting closer and closer to a more AI dominant economy. Worker rights are going to be extremely important. In contracts, I feel contractors need to have the same types of rights as businesses do. And if those are not provided, the companies should be sued, and small claims courts should take those cases on, right? And there shouldn't be this weird thing going on where the small person, the average person, can get screwed over by companies of all sizes. I think that's extremely unfair, and it has to be dealt with. So that'll be sort of my rant for this video. Let me know what you think. I think this is a really important topic. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate it, and I'll see you around.